Today we are going to be looking and working with parallel lines. So first let's graph the two equations that we are given on the same x and y axis. So if we start to take a look, let's graph y equals 2/3 x plus 1. So we're going to go up to our positive 1 on our y axis. And then our slope is 2/3. We're going to connect our line. Alright, so now we have to look at our second equation. This is not in slope-intercept form, so first let's make sure we get it in that form. So we want to add 2x to both sides of the equal sign. These become 0. So 3y equals, since these are not like terms, we can't combine them or add them. So we end up with just 2x minus 6. So then our next step would be to divide everything by 3. So 3 divided by 3 leaves us with 1y. 2x divided by 3 is 2/3 x. And negative 6 divided by 3 is a negative 2. So now in order to graph this equation, we have a y-intercept at negative 2. And our slope is telling us we need to go up 2 and to the right 3. So now we end up with our equation. So looking at our two graphs, what do we notice about these graphs? Well, I noticed that besides my mess up here, we have parallel lines. And since these lines are parallel, remember when we discussed that means they don't intersect. So what part of the equation makes this true? The slope does, because the slopes are equal. So if we take a look at both of our equations, our slope in our first one was 2/3, and so was the slope in our second equation. So when we take a look at identifying if lines are parallel, they one, have to have same slopes, so the slopes have to be equal, and two, the y-intercepts need to be different. So let's take a look at a couple of equations and see if they're going to be parallel or not. So our first one is in slope-intercept form, so we don't have to do anything with that, so let's change this one. So we can add 4x to both sides of the equal sign, so that becomes 0, so we're left with 3y equals, not like terms, so we have 4x plus 21. So our last step to be divide by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1y. 4 divided by 3 is just going to stay 4/3 x. And 21 divided by 3 is 7. So if we look at both of our equations, since our slopes are now different, we can say that no, these lines are not parallel because the slopes are different. So let's take a look at our second example. Again, we have a equation in slope-intercept form. So now let's take a look at our second equation. We need to subtract x to both sides of the equal sign, so those become 0. Negative 3y equals negative x plus 6. So our last step would be to divide everything by our negative 3. So negative 3 divided by negative 3 is a positive y. Negative 1x divided by negative 3 is a positive 1/3 x. 6 divided by negative 3 is a negative 2. So now when we look at both of these equations, our slopes are the same and our y-intercepts are different. So yes, these are parallel lines because the slopes are the same and the y-intercept are different. So our third example, this one is in slope-intercept form. So our first step would be to subtract 21x from both sides of the equal sign. So 0, so we're left with 7y equals negative 21x plus 14. And we divide everything by 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1, so we're left with 1y equals negative 21 divided by 7, so we have negative 3x. 14 divided by 7 is a positive 2. So look at these equations. These two are going to be parallel as we have the same slope. And our y-intercepts is 0 and positive 2, so the y-intercepts are different. Alright, now let's look at what happens and what we need to do in order to write an equation for a line that is parallel to the given line and that passes through the given point. So our first step is to just identify what our slope needs to be. So if we have an equation y equals 6x minus 2, in order for our slope to be parallel to this equation, it needs to be 6. And it has to go through our point 0, 0. So then our second step is to write this into point slope form because we are given a point and we're given a slope. So we're going to have y, our y value is 0, equals our slope of 6 times by the quantity of x plus our x value, which is 0. But we make sure we simplify this. Y plus 0 is y. X plus 0 is just an x. So we're left with y equals 6x. So now we know that these two equations are going to be parallel to each other because they have the same slope but different y-intercepts. So let's look at this last equation for the day. We know in order to be parallel to this equation, we need to have a slope of negative 2, and it needs to go through the point negative 3, 5. So to write this in point slope form, y is minus 5 equals negative 2 times the quantity of x plus 3. So now we can simplify this as well. So we want to distribute our negative 2. So negative 2 times x is a negative 2x. Negative 2 times 3 is a negative 6. So our last step, to get in slope-intercept form, is to make sure our y is by itself. So we want to, instead of subtract 5, add 5 to both sides of our equal sign. So we're left with y, these become 0, equals negative 2x, and negative 6 plus 5 is a negative 1. So we know this equation is going to be parallel to that because we have the same slope, but different y-intercepts.